Hello and welcome to Biology Career Insights, the podcast where we talk with experts from the field of biology to gain valuable insights into the careers and explore ways to navigate the job market in this ever evolving field. I'm your host, Dr. Manish Kumar. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Jitendra Pant. Dr. Pant is the Global Director of Research and Innovation at Caron Products, and he leads the R&D, new product development, product launch, equipment testing, validation, merger and acquisition for portfolio expansion of Caron in the US and UK and business development for Caron in India. Dr. Pant conducted his postdoc research at the University of Michigan and holds a PhD in biomedical engineering from the University of Georgia and a Master of Engineering in Biotechnology from BITS Pilani, India. He has won several national and international awards. He also serves as a reviewer and editorial member of several journals, has published in so many prestigious journals. To share his work and experience with the scientific community, Jiten also runs a small YouTube channel and has founded two startups in the US focused on biomedical devices and technical consulting. Welcome to the BCI podcast, Jiten. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for such a generous introduction, Manish. Really appreciate it. I've seen some of the clips from your podcast, and I really appreciate the kind of work that you are doing. And I think you and I have been talking for about 7 or 8 years now, and we have never met in person. We have always talked virtually, and I'm glad that your journey and my journey kind of intersected, and we are doing this together. And I hope that a lot of people who are listening this, especially the younger students, can take a lot of good advice from this podcast. And I'm excited. Let's get it.
Amazing, Jiten.
Yeah.
So let's dive in straight away. What inspired you to pursue a career in science and how did you get started in the field?
Yeah. So it's a very funny journey. So I come from a very small town. Uh, till date. Continuous supply of electricity is a challenge there.
Which is
We have
what is the
one,
town? Tell us more about.
it's called Ramnagar. Also, a lot of people now know it as Corbett City because Corbett National Park is where my hometown is, and it has garnered a lot of tourist attraction. But as far as education and infrastructure goes, it's not where it should be. There's one government college that is again not where it should be. We could have done much better over the last few years, but no real development there, right? So when I was growing up, so one day I must be about 8 or 10 years old, and all the friends were talking about what they want to become in the future, and I had no clue. And one of the friends said he wants to be a scientist. And I was like, what the hell is a scientist, right? That was the first time I even heard that term. And it so happened, when I think it's the destiny that you hear about something and then you start seeing more and more of it.
Absolutely.
Coincidentally, yeah. So in my sister's library, which was basically a small cupboard, we saw I basically found a book. It's called Vishwa Ke Mahan Vaigyanik, which translates to the great scientists of the world. And I started reading about some of the stories. One of the stories that I read was about Wright brothers. And then I started reading and realized that most of the scientists who have made it big, they started off at a very small town. They had their own struggle. So it's not that you are born a hero, right? You do certain things that turns you into a hero, and then it's not just about the upliftment of your own career, but in your journey you affect so many lives. So that message stayed with me, that it is possible that I can also be a scientist. But then, like every other kid, you get distracted, right? You forget about what you once aspired to become. And then in my 11th grade, I was actually motivated by a teacher to pursue biology. And her name is Madhu Sharma. And people who are listening, I want to give all the credits that whatever I could achieve in my life, major chunk of that goes to her. She was the founding pillar of my initial days and was the person who motivated me to pursue this line because I was all set up to do mathematics after my 10th grade. So she saw something in me that I could not see myself. Uh, and I thought, okay, I'll become a doctor. But then, you know, it's not easy to become a doctor. You have to crack a very difficult exam in India. And I did not. I could not. So I applied for Army, NDA. That did not work out either, right? And then the only engineering college that I applied to that time was ICFI University. And they were one of the very few universities at that time. I'm talking about 2006. Biotechnology was still very new to India. Uh, Only IIT Delhi had, IIT Kharagpur had biotechnology that time. So, and honestly, I was not even aware of what is IIT, what is MIT, what is BITS. I knew nothing. Okay, so I just applied to one college that has a biotech program, and it so turned out that I was accepted in the program, and that's how my journey started. And after that, I pursued a master's and then a PhD, and then here I am today. You and I are talking about helping others.
So that is incredible. So you are also somebody who aspired to become a medical doctor, and then he found his, say, because when you said you wanted to become a scientist when you were 11, it somehow also says that people do not, or people in general are not aware of what it is required to be a scientist. So you found your way without knowing
Yeah,
that you will be a scientist one day, right?
that is true. That is true.
So and this is I mean, I can so much relate with this because for most of the people I talk to, they wanted to become doctors, and then somebody realized, oh, they cannot be good doctors, or they don't like blood. Somebody couldn't qualify the entrance examination, but it was one thing or the other which led to
That
them
was
becoming
yeah.
scientists. And there were some examples where people had like really clarity, but these people are normally more exposed, and well, because you come from a perhaps a small place, uh, you know it was only later, like when was it that occurred to you that, hey, I'll be a scientist, I'll do a PhD, or was it Jiten, that one thing led to another and you thought like PhD is the way forward?
I would say, I think when I wanted to do PhD, I had absolute clarity that I want to do PhD, but it happened with a lot of hardship. So I completed my BTech in biotech engineering, and I think I was fortunate to be picked up among a lot of students who applied from my universities in a campus placement, and I got a job at Biocon.
Mhm.
Biocon, as you would know, and people who are working in India, it is the first biotech company
Yeah,
in
it's
India, one of the best in the world. So I think I my starting was very good.
Mhm.
And at that time, a lot of people used to tell me your dream came true. And I said it was far off my reach. And it was not even in my dream that I once thought that I can work for Biocon. Honestly, I was actually applying for a master's degree.
Mhm.
And I was actually writing IIT entrance exams through GATE.
Mhm.
Again, I was above the cutoff, but for IITs, even 99 percentile is not enough. And I was in that situation where uh, I could have either waited and applied for masters again, or I could have chosen this job at Biocon. At that time, financially also, I do not come from a very
Mhm.
privileged background. It makes sense financially that I take job at Biocon, and also there is a lot of reputation that comes with working with Biocon. It's not Biocon is not any other company. You know that if you go there, you will learn a lot,
Mhm.
and also you would be treated with reverence. So for me, I don't know if I was for me, if it was all about learning, I would say it was the reverence and Biocon reputation that was the driving force. And of course, getting a job right after your bachelor's in India, it's not something that happens to everyone. So
Especially in
you
the
know,
biotech field, I must
yeah,
say.
especially in biotech. So you do not lose those kind of opportunities. So I started off in Biocon as a junior executive.
Mhm.
And a year later, I got promoted to the scientist positions. And I feel very fortunate that I got to work on some of the earliest development of biosimilars, monoclonal antibodies that happened at Biocon. So I was part of that early team. Now that team in itself, it has turned into a company. It's called Biocon Research Limited that branched out. I think Biocon now has about 10 to 12 companies in itself. Back then, it used to be a group of 3 or 4 companies. So I got to contribute in projects now, which later on got FDA approved for psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, breast cancer. In fact, one of the molecule that I work for, it's called itolizumab. It was actually repurposed for the treatment of COVID-19 in 2019, when none of these vaccines were developed. So I feel fortunate in that way. You started off your journey, and that's the biggest perk of being a scientist, that you get to save millions of lives. Versus, like, now when I go back, if I have to choose between becoming a doctor and becoming a scientist, I'll still choose to be a scientist, because I believe
because
we
you
are,
understand the impact, which, as a naive person. And, I think, Jiten, you raised a very important point, because I think, all our dreams are also products of social conditioning. One
yeah,
wants to become a doctor or engineer, not then because he wants to, because he's seeing these people socially well established. And, that kind of uh, also motivates you, rather than
yes,
just your interest alone.
that is true. And I think early on you were asking, sorry, I'm using two screens here, so I might be looking away
Yeah.
for a bit. But early on you were asking, like, why do we not aspire to become a scientist, right? And one of the reasons is, until you make a transition to industries or become a tenure track professor, actually scientific positions are not very well paid off. And in society that we live, jobs that are most talked about are the jobs where you are paid off very well. Like becoming a doctor might not be number one aspiration, because you get to save life. And I'm sorry to say that,
That is
but,
true.
but a lot of people are driven by the financial benefits, that the financial perks that comes with it. Whereas I really respect people who choose to be a scientist, because you accept low wages, you accept working for 14 to 18 hours every day for a bigger cause that is not just about getting a PhD degree, but it is actually about making a difference, so that you can come up with drugs and with biologics that doctors can prescribe and then now treat people. So, without us, there will be no prescription. And
Absolutely.
without, and
I
then
think,
without,
and this is such an important point, Jiten, because, uh, I mean, most people, or most, I think average people or patients, they think that it's the doctor who is inventing this medicine. But doctors are just like, the link between, I think, the scientists who develop the drug and the and the patients. And I
yeah,
think their role is also very important. I'm not like,
exactly. You are actually speaking my mind here. So this is not to subsidize their importance. It is just to say everybody has a role in this entire chain, right from drug development all the way until patient treatment. We cannot work without doctor. A scientist cannot work without doctors and reach the patient, and a doctor cannot work without a scientist and reach the patient and provide the kind of treatment that they need. So it's the marriage of both the words that makes a treatment possible. And I think time is changing now. I now know people who willingly pursue this route. It is still a very challenging route to become a scientist. But I also know early in 2010, 2011, it used to be seen as, oh, you could not get a job and therefore you are pursuing higher education. That used to be a trend 13 years ago. That thing is changing now. Like I left my own job. I left my
yeah.
job.
So we will now. Sure. I mean, you can just discuss your journey, because you had a job, you were working for Biocon, and then, then what, say, how long did you work for Biocon?
Yes, so I worked for 3 years at Biocon. Um, and then during the first year itself, I knew that I want to pursue higher education, because I had applied for masters. It did not work out. So that's, for me, is it? I don't know if it is a good thing or a bad thing. If I start on something, I have to finish it. I may not finish it the same day. I may not finish it the same day, but I know that I am now married to this goal. So I knew that I have to pursue higher education. And as I started working more there, I actually interacted with people who are in leadership position at Biocom. People who are doing exceptionally well were also the people who have PhD and postdoc from US specifically and from European universities.
Mhm.
And I thought, let me first start applying for European universities. And I don't know, for whatever reason, things would not work out. Between 2011 and 2013, I applied for I wrote to more than 200 professors, applied to a lot of universities. Whatever savings that I had, I would, and I don't know if things have changed now. Back in those days, I have to print my application to send it to European universities. I don't know if it is still the case for
No,
PhD.
really, I think you can do it online. But wait a second, we will go a bit back. So first tell us your journey of doing your master's. Because I think you went to BITS Pilani before.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll tell you that. So my dream was not to do a master's. My dream was to do a PhD. I thought it was,
Okay.
yeah, and I thought with a 4-year bachelor's in India, that time that those were early days, but it was I was still eligible.
No, no, you are so right. So what happens, then I can tell you. So European university are very hesitant taking somebody, just with a bachelor's. That is the
Yeah,
reason. Yeah. So
yeah, and that
you will there rarely see. So you will see many acceptance in the US, but in Europe it's very rare because they think, okay, they don't discriminate between 3 years and 4 years bachelor's. In fact, all they want is like, no, the 4 years of bachelor's is required, in many universities to get even admission to masters. But I have not seen anyone doing their PhD right after, their
okay.
bachelor's.
So basically, it
Except
turned
UK,
out that
except UK, I think, UK is an exception sometimes, but yeah.
so it turned out that I was basically aiming in the wrong geography. Correct? Like I have 4 years of bachelor's, and I thought I have 3 years of experience. Biocon had actually given me global exposure. I worked on very big projects, and I thought my profile is ready. But maybe, like as I'm listening to you now, and it turned out later that I was chasing the wrong geography, right? And so after 2 3 years of trying, I thought, okay, it's not working out. Let me first do a master's. So that was my realization too. But at that time, also, I just wanted to come to Europe, and I applied for a few universities in India. I wanted to be very selective, so I actually chose BITS Pilani Master's Program over an IIT Guwahati's PhD. And a lot of people may think that I'm crazy. Like
No,
who does-
if you aim to go abroad and then that's the decision you have to take, then of course you will go for a master's.
Yes,
It's
yes.
not a crazy.
So and BITS Pilani, after I joined BITS Pilani, I realized what does it mean to be actually studying in a premium institute, because up until that point, I used to feel that it's unfair that people from tier one, students from tier one college are given more privilege than students from tier two or tier three college. But that perspective really changed when I joined BITS Pilani. I realized there is so much overall development that happens in such institutes, and BITS Pilani is. I take a lot of pride in being a BITS Pilani alum, and that actually opened doors for a lot of opportunities for me. The moment I entered there, I started getting a lot of acceptance. Like even before I finished my first year, I started getting a lot of acceptance. Around that time, I had also visited Germany, University of Würzburg, for a workshop.
Mhm.
And when I came back, I was actually looking for internship or thesis program abroad. So I applied to US universities, just two universities. One was University of Cincinnati, their medical school, and another one was University of Georgia. But the professor accepted me for a PhD instead. And then I decided, okay, let me go to US for completing my master thesis, and then I'll transition to the PhD program. And in the meantime, I have to do formalities, like I still gave interviews. We had research. I shared my research proposal. I still have to fulfill the university requirement of giving GRE and TOEFL, which is right now a lot of universities have waived off that requirement, GRE requirement. That time it was mandatory. I'm talking about 2013, 2014. And ultimately, I came to US, and I would also like to give credit to a professor, Dr. Sridev Mahapatra. He is a professor in BITS Pilani. So he was the one who was very well aware that I am desperately looking for a PhD position. So this advertisement actually came on their email. I think this professor from US have shared an email to all the BITS faculties. He saw that and he instantly forwarded that email to me, and then I approached the professor. Everything worked out at the end. And in 2015, January 2015 is when I finally landed United States. First completed my master thesis on J1 visa.
Mhm.
And then August 2015 is when I started my PhD on F1 visa
Mhm.
at University of
You
Georgia.
went there, I mean, I think after 1.5 years of your master's, you already went.
Yes.
You
That's
did
correct.
your thesis and then you kind of started your PhD, right?
That's correct.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's how my journey started in the US.
Wow, that's amazing. So Jiten, as a follow-up question, can you tell to our audience about the process of applying for a PhD in the US?
Yes, absolutely. So there are two ways. One thing is you first write to an office, you first write to a professor via email, and then pass the interview round, apply with a research proposal, and the sequence may change. The sequence may change. Sometimes the professor is looking for a position, they advertise it on their website. Sometimes you just write a cold email. So one way or the other, once you get to interact with the professor, they'll do their due diligence. They'll take an interview. They'll ask you for a research proposal, and ultimately they forward your application. They'll put you in touch with the administration of the university, and then you still have to fulfill the formalities. Like if university might have a certain
Criteria.
GPA
Mhm.
cutoff, but it saves you a lot of time because now you know your admission is almost certain. You just have to pass that minimum criteria. The professor already liked you. The other way is that you apply the regular way. You go to university portal. You apply to different universities. You will receive a call from one of the professors. You give the interview. That the rest of the piece remain the same. It's just that you shuffle the way
Process.
these events happen. But ultimately, it's the university and the professor. Both the pieces have to come together for you to be accepted in a PhD program. Um, in my case, I first applied to the professor and then was accepted in the program.
Mhm. So are there any tips, like you said you wrote your GRE, and in European countries also your GATE score is valid in many universities. So are there any tips that you would like to give to students, if they are eyeing for US?
Yeah, so I'll say, so GATE unfortunately does not. Any of the Indian tests do not work in US.
Yes.
Unfortunately, they are accepted in a lot of European countries and even Singapore. I am aware
Mhm.
they are accepted. I wish that was the case here too, but it's not. Now universities have a lot of good universities have waived off the requirement of GRE. They realize that it does not always does the right justification in evaluating
Mhm.
someone's profile. Some universities are still going for it, but majority have reduced it. It can be seen as a good news or a bad news because once GRE requirement is waived off, now your credentials needs to be very strong. You cannot be accepted in a PhD program if you are not ready for it. And you prove it through your research proposal, you prove it during the interview process. But ultimately, even if you do not have prior publication, that can actually change the game for you. If you do not have prior publication, at least show certain examples of your curiosity,
Mhm.
your hunger to learn, and how you would utilize the opportunity that is given to you, because it's a big commitment. I would also say that if somebody think they're not ready for the program, they should not start into PhD journey because it's not an easy journey. You have to commit to the process. And I would say even if you're not ready in terms of credentials, if you are mentally ready and you are ready to give it your all and be aware, like make a calculated judgment, be aware that it's not going to be a 9 to 5 lab work. There are no fixed hours. There would be odd hours. You have to work during weekends. If you are ready to commit to that level, pursue a PhD. Otherwise, just weigh your options. Now, talking about the preparation, one thing I would say is the way things have changed now. First thing is, if you want to do a PhD in Europe, take advice from someone who is doing a PhD in Europe or have done PhD in Europe. If you want to do a PhD in Canada, do the same thing. Like talk to the person who is already in Canada or have done their PhD. If you want to do PhD in US, take only and only take advice from someone who have done their PhD here. Don't even take advice from people who directly came here to work or do their postdoc. That's number one.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Even with the best intention, someone may misguide you. And this applies to every sphere of your life. When you take professional advice, taking advice is an art.
Yeah.
You have to be
So if you
careful.
want to be rich, if you really want to be rich, take advice from rich people and not from people who have written books about being rich.
Yes, sure. Yeah. That's a very, very good example, right? And there are a lot of YouTubers who are talking about being rich and get rich faster things. So yeah, coming back to the topic here. So one thing is you should know whom to not take advice from. Another thing is know who to take advice from. So do not hesitate to seek professional advice. I think one of the earliest mistake that I made that delayed my acceptance in the PhD program was I was not talking to the right people.
Mhm.
I actually, in fact, did not even reached out to enough people. I reached out to two or three, but it happened by chance. But I was not diligently pursuing someone. I should have reached out to people via LinkedIn. I should have not just written email to professor, but also to people who were doing PhD. I did it. I would say it's not that I was completely unaware, but I could have done a better job there.
Mhm.
Third thing I would
And
say,
No, and Jiten, a very good point, because I think this is where, you said the difference between premium institutes and a normal institutes. This is all the difference because, in a good institute, you are connected well, you are more aware, and then, you are motivated to, because you know the process, you are motivated to apply. Whereas
yes,
if you have only a superficial about idea about how to apply, your brain doesn't,
exactly.
kind of really motivate you to apply because there are some pieces missing in terms
Yes.
of information, so.
No, exactly that. So because when I was in Biocon, I was looking up to people who have done their PhD, but I did not know how does the process work. So I fantasized an idea of a PhD, and I thought I can live the dream and I can live the life that they have, but I did not have a plan, right? And when I moved to BITS, which I would say was the turning point, and when I go back, I always uh, feel good about the decision that I made because a lot of people have advised me not to do that, not to leave a job and then pursue masters in a private college. I'm glad I did that because the moment I entered there, the perspective changed. When you are surrounded by so many smart people around you who are, and the alumni network, right? They have done, BITS have produced some of the best entrepreneurs, some of the best scientists, some of the best professors. When you hear these stories and it becomes a part of your daily life, you think if they can do it, I can do it too. It does not look like a distinct
Mhm.
dream that is very hard to achieve. It looks like every other person in these premium institute is living the life that you want to live, right? And that mindset changes. Now you also have a plan. You also know you have a GPS basically in your hand
Yeah,
that you did not have earlier. You were basically asking random strangers on road where does this
where to
path
go
lead?
exactly.
And now you have a GPS system. So premium institute or the good advice gives you a GPS system to follow.
And I agree on the professional advice, so in many aspects of life, I think a professional advice sometimes can really change your life.
Yeah. So talk to alums, but also another thing you should do is also be flexible. Do not marry to the idea of what exactly do you want to do research on, because right now everything is so interdisciplinary. Sooner or later, you will be intersecting with other fields. So as long as you think you are technically wired and you have the ability to learn and then adopt yourself, do not just say that I want to become a mechanical engineer or a civil engineer or a biological engineer. Within life science, also, we know there are so many subfields and they vary in the kind of needs and requirement that they have. But that aptitude to learn is very important. So that flexibility is important. Another thing I would say, people who can financially afford it should not hesitate to also seek professional advice. Maybe there are services. I'm not talking about services that charge you money and then send you to random
Private
tier
schools.
colleges. Don't do that. But there are also good professional services where they can give you genuine advice. They will charge you for that, but I would say it is worth every penny. I Between 2011 and 2015, I spent 4 hours chasing a PhD. It could have happened in the first 4 months if I was given the right kind of advice. In my case, I would say even if I knew that I can do that, I would still not opt for it because financially I was not in a position. But people who are
Mhm.
in an in a situation where they can financially afford to seek professional advice, I would still ask you to be cautious and seek advice from the legit, genuine firms. But do not hesitate. It's a good investment and it's worth every penny.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, and three things are very important for PhD. I discovered that. Three things. First is mentor, second is mentor, and third is mentor.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing it up. Because I wanted to talk about this also. A lot of people get affected by the glamorized ranking of the university. You would still want to be in. I'm taking example of US now. So in US, the universities are categorized as R1, R2, and R3. So as long as you are in R1 universities, which is the university that receives maximum amount of funding from federal agencies, you're still good. You don't have to be in top three to be successful. It's okay even if you are in top 50, but you get a good mentor. You still want to make sure that you have minimum facilities. The professor has funding, that you do not have to wait for months to buy a reagent or to buy an equipment. All those things have to be in place, but always place your mentor above the university ranking. A lot of students come to me. I advise them this thing. They don't listen, or they listen but do not follow. They end up I'm talking about tier 1 colleges. They end up being in top 10 universities in the US, and then write back to me after 2-3 months of joining and say, things are not going well with me. My professor is not treating me with reverence. I do not feel I belong here. I want to quit. What shall I do? And I remind them again, do not be married to the ranking of a university. It's a 5-6 years. You cannot spend 5-6 years in a lab where do not fit well.
Yeah, or the hot topic, people want to pursue nanotechnology, whatever, stem cell research when they are young, whatever is the market trend, they kind of try to do something very, yeah, and PhDs are like your master's, your bachelor's degree, where, of course the university matters, but the university matters only because, a better university will have better infrastructure, better funding and things like that, as you rightly said. But never estimate, a mentor in your PhD, because I think, he's the one who can really
They can make or break. They can make or break your experience during PhD.
absolutely.
So it is very important. Another question that I get from a lot of PhDs is, they say, we do not have a publication. Do we still qualify to do a PhD? And the answer is yes, you do. You still qualify. Having a publication makes it easier for you. But this is one advice I want to give. If you don't have a publication, let's say you are from a tier 2 college, tier 3 college in India, you don't have publication, your university is not supporting it, or your professor is not supporting it, write a review article and submit the review article. And then write review article in the topic. Yeah, and the write review article in the topic that that you most likely want to pursue, and make it broad enough. If nothing, you'll at least get a publication. And that may not show that you have worked in lab, but it will still show your hunger and you being resourceful, and then doing your best within the limited resources that are available.
That's a great advice. Yeah. So tell us, Jiten, about when you came to the US. Also, it was a culture shock for you, like any Indian going to the US. So what were the challenges that you faced in US, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I would not lie about it. The idea of coming to a foreign land sounds very fancy and glamorous when you are in your home country. But the moment you land here, you will feel like a misfit in the initial days, especially when you come here as a student. See, when you come here to do a job, you are financially secure. But when you come here as a student, financially, you don't have anything. You don't know anyone. I'm talking about people who don't have relatives in the United States, which I did not have. I was the first person from my family who even knew the difference between what is America and what is UK. Like I come from a hometown where people think Germany is same as US and is same as UK, right? So coming to a foreign land, and you can first of all may have an identity crisis. I come from a background where I have always been the school topper or university topper. I did well in biocon, and then suddenly you come to a foreign land, nobody knows you. You have to make an identity from scratch. So there was a cultural shock. But I would say, and this may this may sound very interesting. So now when someone asks me how to accommodate to a new culture, I would say first thing that you should fix is fix your food. Like the 3 meal, and just figure out where to get groceries from, because unless your food part is fixed, you cannot focus on anything else.
And I 100% agree on that. Yeah.
Okay. And then second thing was, financially, I was actually not ready. When I was accepted, I asked my professor, can you sponsor my trip? to the United States. And then he could not because the grants did not allow, and nobody does it in US. So I do not blame him for that. So ultimately, I have to borrow money. I borrowed money from my friends. I borrowed money from my sisters. And then I thought, okay, I'll start earning and I'll start sending back money. So this is how I came. And then that money got exhausted within the first 1 week because, when you spend in dollars, the money does not last very long. And then I have to buy new stuff. Adjusting in any new city, even in your home country, it brings a lot of unforeseen expenses.
So
When
that's just to say, like, because here in the Max Plancks, we were like paid the first month in advance, just for the taking care of these expenses. So in US, it doesn't happen like that.
no,
Okay.
no, you get your salary at the end of the month. So I was basically waiting for my salary, but then it got over in a matter of less than 1 week. I called one of my seniors who had come to US 5-6 years before I had, and I borrowed $200 from him. That's how I survived the whole month. I cannot imagine now if somebody asked me to survive for 3 days on $200, that would be a challenge. But that those were the time when you figure out things. I would also say I did not know how to sign up for coursework. It is very different in India and it is very different here. So that was a challenge, and you have to constantly. In India, you have this habit of you see the person standing next to you and you ask for help. But that's not the culture in the United States. People are very independent. And
I
for
was
me,
about to say that it's not spoon fed, so you have to figure your way. You have
yes.
to choose the credits, yeah.
So I learned it the harder way to become independent and not just ask people to help you, but start figuring out if nobody can help you, just live with it. You know. And third thing was, so financials were a problem, and so in the meantime, while I was doing my PhD, I still have to send money home. I still have to do other things that I wanted to do. I did not have a car. In US, public transport is very weak. So without a car, you cannot imagine. You
It's
cannot
so
imagine.
huge. It's
Yeah.
gigantic country, yeah.
Yeah, right. So if you have to go for groceries, you have to always ask someone to take you there, and then the dependency increases, right? And then it's frustrating because you do not come from the same culture. When you ask someone to take you for groceries, it is not seen as a very polite gesture. Like in India, I think it's still fine. You ask your friends, they help you, but that's not the culture. And again, nobody to blame. It's just that's how people grow up in different parts of the world, and it's a cultural difference rather than saying one is a better way or the worst way of living. So all those things happened, and then I did not have money, so I would sleep on floor. I did not have a bed for 2 years.
For 2 years in your
For
PhD.
2 years. Yeah.
So, I mean, I must ask you this, Jiten. So, aren't PhD students paid? Like, how much are they paid there?
Oh no, they're paid well. I would say my financial situation in India was also not very well.
Also, you had to, because you were forced to kind of send money, so you were saving.
Also, I have borrowed money from a lot of people
Okay.
to be able to come to US. And even when I was doing my masters, it was from a private college. I had fellowship, but I borrowed money for my masters also.
Okay.
It was just paying off my debts.
Got you.
Yeah, I don't think this is everyone who has PhD, you are paid enough in PhD.
Enough to survive at least, yeah.
I was just a special case, I would say. I think that
No, I think, I mean, like you, there would be many people who kind of, who have debts and other things can happen.
Yeah. And then I think right now the PhD salary varies anywhere between 25,000 to 35,000 per year. Per year. That time I believe it was 19,000 to 24,000. So things have changed for good. If you are on NSF fellowship, only citizens qualify, immigrants don't. But NSF fellowships gives you very well PhD stipend. So all those things happen. I would also now this is the first time I'm sharing it on public platform, but I would also do plasma donation just to make that extra money. So I just basically survived. I would say
Well,
first
people do that also in Germany, I mean, even if you have enough money, there's like, okay, they can always have some more, right? So
Yeah.
people do that. So plasma donation, yeah. Because you are working in a clinical setting, you can always go donate your blood or whatever, get some pocket money. People do that.
And in US, when you come here on F1 visa for doing PhD, you're not allowed to do part-time job. So I was left with no other way. It's like you have to survive on your PhD stipend. Even if you want to do part-time job, you cannot. and you want to abide by the rules of the countries that you live in. So all those things happened, but ultimately things worked out. I had a bed to sleep after 2 years. I had a car after 3 years. Uh, things started falling in place, and I think there was no looking back after that. But everything teaches you a lot. So I'm not complaining. I think I am grateful for the journey that I went through. It has taught me a lot, and it also humbles you.
Mhm.
You remain grounded, and you know where you come from, and remembering that is very important, because then only you
Absolutely.
can help others. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you think now these two challenges were the main challenges, like the cultural stuff and the financial stuff, right? Any interesting stories that you remember from that time, you know?
Stories. Uh, stories. I would say I don't think I have a specific story, but there are several incidences. I would say, for example, once I started fixing my cooking and the meals, I started feeling better. Another thing is I started actually making friends here. Started culturally aligning, understanding. What does US demands from you in terms of finding that cultural compatibility. So I started hanging out with people who are from US. I started watching more American movies, and those are the kind of things that help me in terms of stories. I think I spend most of my time in lab. Honestly, somebody can see this as boring, but honestly, my time at UGA throughout my PhD, I would go to lab, I would work. Weekends I am working, late evenings I am working. I just worked, and worked. So there is no interesting story there, but I joined a musical club. I was the lead singer of a band, and
Wow.
I think that also helped me vent out some of my pressure from academia. And I basically became a part of a musical band, or it used to be called Polykarma. A lot of I was the only. Actually, there were two Indians there, and the others were either Indian American or American folks. So we started doing fusion music, where we'll do Bollywood songs, but the music would be Western. And yeah, it was fun. Those 3 years in the musical band, with the musical band, a lot of stress can be released when you attach yourself to music, right? And in the meantime, I also joined Toastmasters for public speaking. I think early on I realized one thing, that if you have to be successful, you have to be good with public speaking. So I joined Toastmasters, and then I started chasing the dream of giving TED Talks, which did happen actually. As soon as in the final year of my PhD, I gave my first TED Talk, and then the second TED Talk was a few months after I finished my PhD. So it worked out well. Uh, I am actually, I don't know how it looks from the outside, but I'm actually a very boring guy who does not do a lot of a lot of fun things. It's changing now. After I got married, I'm trying to learn to be having fun now. My thanks to my wife, I do a lot of other things that I did not do before getting married.
But I think, you know, if you're playing in a music band, I think you're already interesting guy, right? And I think I connected with you because I found you quite interesting. So, you know, just
Thank you.
change the opinion about you being boring and then rest should be fine.
Okay, I'll take that as a compliment from you.
Yes, yes. So, you know, I mean, you have seen all the, you know, highs and lows of the US life. You know, you have been, you know, sleeping on the floor, as you said, and then now, you know, as a global director. So, what advice would you give to students who are, say, considering for higher education in US?
I would basically complete your sentence first. So sleeping on the floor and now traveling on business flights, right? And then you I would say I'm fortunate that I get to uh, be exploring one of the best hotels around the world. And then, all the way from, you start your journey sleeping on the floor, and all these things are happening now. But when you start off in your career growth, do not just invest your time on technical skills, but also invest your time on interpersonal skills. I don't know why soft skills are called soft skills, because they are actually the number one reason why will you progress in your career. So invest on interpersonal skills, invest on communication, both written communication and verbal communication. I've joined some public speaking clubs like Toastmasters. Network with the right people. You are an average of 5 people you closely network with. So make sure that you invest your time wisely. Do not waste your time on people who are not bringing anything to your life. And by that, I say be cautious. Like, even if that person is your relative, I would say just be cautious. Only invite good vibes in your life. If somebody looks down upon you, if there are naysayers, people who do not believe in you, you do not have to be with them just because you were born in, born in that surrounding. Just make that conscious choice that you have to surround yourself with people who support you, or at least people whom you can learn from, people who can aspire you. Also, make sure that do not just hang out with people from your own age group. Try to seek advice from people who are experienced. If you want to be if you want to be somewhere, find out people who are already doing what you want to do, and then buy their time. Also, I would say invest in mentors. LinkedIn is a platform where you can actually reach out to strangers and then say, I'm seeking mentorship. Can you help me? And I understand people who are successful are also very busy. So you might not always get, 1 hour of their time every day. But even if they speak to you once in your lifetime, you would realize that that encounter will have such a deep impact in your professional journey than talking to 100 people from your age group who are still learning and still not professionally where you want to be. So yeah, and then find a good balance. I would say do not make the mistake. I would also advise, do not sleep on floor. Do not donate plasma and then find it. I would say I would save money. I will go through hardship. And looking back, I feel, the amount of money that you are saving in 5 years,
It's
you
peanuts.
can make the same amount of money in 2 3 months if you get into the right job. It's not worth it. I'm not advising you to be now, spending left and right, but do not compromise more than you need to. I would say I made that mistake. I would fed myself on, even when I was working at Biocon, I would try to save all the money. I'm feeding myself on biscuits. I'm skipping meals. I did the same thing in US. It's not a good way of living.
It's not a good advice. Yeah, that I totally agree. And
Don't do that.
sometimes, and Jiten, I would not just blame you. I think it's also the way we are brought up. So sometimes, like I can also see, like, for example, my father, he has a hard time spending on himself, and that also kind of, sometimes it's like when I spend too much, I have that guilty feeling. And I shouldn't be guilty because I'm earning my money and I can spend it the way I want.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
so
yeah,
yeah,
still be careful with your financial choices, but then also, I mean, we don't be in that extreme of this way or that way. Just find a balance. So when I say that I slept on floor and then I do not say it with a lot of pride. And I think I could have made, if I'll go back, I'll make different choices.
no, but you are just telling the honest stories, and I think your story will resonate for a lot of people who would have been, in the similar shoes. So
Yeah, I hope so. Yes.
yes, and I think the advices you give is not just for higher education in US, but it's a life advice. So that's these are great points.
Yeah.
Now comes the very interesting part, and this is more important for the PhD students. So about transitioning. So you aspire to be a scientist. You went on to do a PhD. You published real good number of papers. What made you leave the academic setup and transition into industry?
Yeah. So it's a long story, but I would try to condense it. So I worked at Biocon before I started my PhD. I was aware of industry culture. I was also aware of advantages and disadvantages. I had spent good amount of time in academia. I was aware of advantages and disadvantages. Now we talk about, deciding your own journey and leading your own journey rather than saying this person is doing that, that's why I want to do PhD, or this person is doing that, that's why I want to join industry. I thought I'll explore both academia and industry. And I have time now. Like, I cannot make such decisions at the age of 45 when I have a family who relies on me, when I have kids and all that, right? This is the age where taking risk is okay. Because in worst case scenario, you will change the course of action because everything teaches you whether you pursue. So one thing I want to tell is you cannot go wrong with your choices. As long as you're disciplined, hardworking, and you give it your all, it does not matter whether you are in academia or industry, you will be successful and you'll be happy. Now, talking about why did I change course of actions? So I have worked in industry, and then I came to academia. And when I was in BITS, I thought I'll join industry. And then I took the PhD route. When I was doing PhD, I thought I'll join industry. And then I suddenly wanted to become a professor. So all those things keep happening back and forth, right? But I was open. I never felt guilty of why am I changing my mind? Why am I thinking this way or that way? I was clear that this is the age to explore. And it's okay to explore. It's okay to be confused, because you're not being confused about a good choice and a bad choice. You are confused between two good choices, right? So either way, you will do good. So I have published good number of papers. I have 16 publications from my PhD. I have filed 7 patents. I have a lot of awards. I was the valedictorian of my PhD program. In fact, I was the first Indian who ever became a convocation speaker as a student in the history of University of Georgia College of Engineering. Um, and then I had the privilege to meet the director of CDC in person. He gave me a surprise visit. I have given TED talks. So in academia, and I had also written grants. Like I was one of the first PhD students for my PhD advisor. I have written more than 40 grants, and it may look like, oh, is it an exaggerated number? I have to really, be very cautious when I give this number. I think I'm underplaying myself when I say that I have written 40 grants. I think I wrote more than that. And then I also got grants as a principal investigator and co-investigator from NIH and CDC. And you would know, as an immigrant, where you are limited to very few grants that you are even eligible for. Yeah, so I was one of the first PhDs in the lab. So it was a lab that was just yet to be established. I started working under an assistant professor who was yet to be tenured. So as he was growing in his career, and as the lab was growing, I got exposed to different opportunities. See, like when you are one of the first students, I was actually one of the first two PhD students that were hired around the same time. Now, in the process of establishing a lab, I was learning at the same pace, and with which the professor was growing, at least proportionally, if not the same. And then I got exposed to these grant writing opportunities because he was busy setting up the lab, and then he has to do so many other things. So he seeked help. Fortunately or unfortunately, I was actually ready, and maybe the credit goes to my prior experience. I did not come right after my bachelor's degree. I had worked at Biocon, so I was aware of how to write technical documents, and then I have a master's degree. So that preparedness, the time that I took before getting a PhD admission was paying off right now. So I got opportunities. We wrote grants. I in fact wrote more than 40 grants for my PI. And then later on, I realized that I was eligible for some of the grants that I can write as a principal investigator myself. But for that, we had to start a company. So we started a company. We have 7 patents. We thought, let's commercialize these patents. I have 16 publications. I did not want my PhD research to go waste. Right before I was thinking of starting a company, I actually even gave interview for postdoc from one of the best institutes. Like I gave postdoc interviews at Stanford, MIT. I got interview at Oxford, Harvard. So I was also tempted to go to those institutions. So the choice was now: do you want to start your own company based on your patents, or do you want to go to these academic institutes, which has its own perk because that helps you. Being associated with these big names helps you. So, but ultimately, I made a call, and then I decided that I want to start a company with my PI. So we co-founded a company. I wrote grants. I got grants, and then suddenly, so this was all happening in 2019. In the meantime,
Which kind of a company? Was it a product company like?
it was a product-based company, biomedical devices, especially blood contacting biomedical devices. You were talking about UTIs early on before the interview started. So this basically we are developing devices that can cure anything that has to do with infection or blood clot related issues that comes from invasive devices like catheters, vascular grafts, or even in vivo insulin pumps. We also developed wound healing patches. In fact, I actually got a surprise visit from the director of CDC that time because of my work on wound healing patches that were nitric oxide releasing. If somebody wants to learn more about the work that I did, they can actually listen to the TED talks that I have. Actually, especially people who are interested to learn about antibiotic resistance and its side effects. Um, So yeah, all those experience have actually prepared me to take a job in academia, because grant writing, publication, patents are the things that you need to be a successful professor. But then everything was going well with the startup also. But in the meantime, some setbacks happened in my personal life. This was all happening in 2019.
Mhm.
Uh, my mom was not in her best health, and then my father passed away. I have to make multiple visits to India. So this is basically the irony in my situation, that professionally I was doing very well, but personally things were not in place, and it was nobody's fault. Um, and then I ultimately decided, and I do not want to highlight and divert from the topic here, but ultimately in October 2019, some situation arose where I thought I want to be a professor now. And then I discussed that with.
Okay, so this was after, all the unfortunate incidences within your like personal life. After that, you decided that, okay, no, I want to be a professor.
Yes, but it has nothing to do with those incidences.
Okay.
It's just that situation geared in the direction where I thought
Mhm.
I now knew how to start a company.
Mhm. Mhm.
I have gotten my own grants. I knew that if I want to come back here, I can do it someday.
Mhm.
But I think somewhere there was also an urge. I previously gave you an example of, I when I start thing, I have to finish them. I might not finish them on the same day, right? So I had started for postdoc positions, and I thought, getting an admission in these premium institutes with such high exposure, and also these are in US. One thing is sure: if you want to be successful in academia, you have to be associated with labs and professors who have a history of producing professors.
Mhm.
Uh,
That's every group.
okay, yeah, right. So it's not just about writing grants, but it's also about who is writing your recommendation letters. Unfortunately, that is the need in academia. But I thought, okay, even before I pursue a postdoc, because I have grants, let me give a chance to, maybe somebody will hire me as an assistant professor, and then I can start my own company individually if I have to, because now I know the process. Uh, so I pursued that.
So you
I
directly started applying for assistant professor roles.
I started applying for tenure track. I had not even finished. Like I just finished my PhD. It was few months after I finished my PhD,
Mhm.
and
No, but in exceptional cases, in exceptional cases, I have seen people who right after their PhD jump on to start as an assistant professor, but that's quite an exception.
yeah, it is very rare, right? So it was, I won't say it was easy. Like I do not want to take names here, but some of the people, they even demotivated me by saying, "What are you doing? Like, are you out of your mind?" And they say there is a very thin line difference between being confident and being overconfident and things like that. And I took it with a grain of salt, and I said I want to give it a shot.
Mhm.
Because I had checked all the boxes, honestly. Like the only thing I did not have was I did not have a postdoc. But as far as the minimum requirement is concerned, I have grants, I have publications, I have patents, I
Mhm.
have the experience of writing to federal agencies, I have the collaboration, I have the exposure, right? And I thought I'm good at writing, and I did not mind writing grants. That is another challenge. If you want to be a professor, you have to be enjoying the process of writing. Otherwise, it can be very frustrating now, right? Now everything is at place. I said, let me give it a shot, regardless of whether people support this idea of applying or not. I applied, and fortunately, I got a call from 6 universities, not just one or two, but 6 universities, and that includes very good universities, including University of Massachusetts, University of Wisconsin,
Mhm.
University of New Hampshire, some of the best universities in the United States. So it was not that I was getting lucky. It I had something in my
Actually,
program that was working out.
yeah. Mhm.
Uh, so basically, so one thing is I proved to myself that it can still happen despite not having a postdoc. But ultimately, my goal, I would be very honest here. My goal was not to be a professor. My goal was to use that as a platform to start a company, and maybe multiple companies, like do research,
Being a
file for.
serial entrepreneur.
Yes, so do research, file for patents, and then start different companies out of it. That was the plan that I had. But all this is happening between October 2019 to February 2020. uh, and that was the peak of COVID, especially in US. The first wave started in US, and it was very bad here. And some of these positions where I was invited for campus interview, those positions got frozen. And now suddenly it came a point where I have already told my co-founder and my advisor that I'm leaving. There are these universities that were about to take me that have changed their plan because of COVID. And now the biggest challenge as an immigrant for you is not the opportunity, but maintaining your visa.
Oh my God. Yes, that's another challenge. So this is
Right?
this is the challenge. Perhaps you can tell us, highlight about these.
Yeah. So
These challenges are not, I mean, to an extent in Europe, I must say, but
okay.
Mhm.
Here it is like it's a until so now I am a green card holder. But until you get green card in US, nothing is certain. Especially, my I think my the unfortunate situation was that first of all, things were not going well in my personal life. Secondly, COVID happened, and professionally also, it limited the professional growth you can have. Like if somebody is freezing positions, there were not many career avenues around the time of COVID. Like fundings was shutting down, labs were shutting down, nobody's hiring, and now suddenly you are in a visa crunch. And there were no changes made by authorities in US to accommodate these kind of special situations where you are eligible, you are talented, but the visa situation is tricky now, right? So around that time, I thought, okay, let me apply for postdoc now because I had to survive as an immigrant. I started applying for postdoc, and that was also an opportunity. I never had a postdoc. I thought, okay, let me have a postdoc. Maybe this is an indication that I should do a postdoc, and I'll see how it goes. So I started working on my postdoc. It was based on beta cell therapy for type 1 diabetes. My prior experience was on infection and thrombosis using nitric oxide. So this was a good transition. The project was completely different from what I've done in the past. So I knew that I will get to learn a lot. So I spent 1.5 years there. And during that time, I realized I do not want to be in academia.
thought about quitting your postdoc and then going to industry. And what was the reason for it?
Yes, I'm saying one of the reasons was also realizing that, when you work in industry, and I have worked at Biocon before, so I knew what to expect from industry. I think there is a myth that floats in academia that if you want to be a researcher, you have to be in academia. That is the biggest lie someone can sell you. You have to be in the right industry, especially life sciences. There are plethora of opportunities. So being in industry does not stop you from becoming a scientist and an inventor. As a matter of fact, the company that I work for, Caron Products, I still contribute towards R&D. I head the R&D there. We still aspire to publish, to have posters. We file patents. We are doing everything that you can do in academia. So that idea of comparing academia and say if you have to publish and if you have to file patents, you have to be in academia, that is actually a false idea. You have to find the right employer. Okay. Second thing is, of course, there is financial stability. For me, that was not the driving factor. I always believe that if you are talented and motivated, money comes.
Yeah, but I mean, just you started your postdoc and just one day you realize I don't want to be. So what led you to leave the postdoc? That's the question.
Yeah, I would say I think the jump that I made from my PhD and postdoc, again, this is an advice for people who are pursuing postdoc. I've always heard that you should do postdoc in an area that is entirely different from your PhD because that way you can grow. I took that advice too seriously. I should not have. I think even when you transition from one subfield to another subfield, there should be at least a 40% overlap or a 50% overlap in that transition. In my case, there was 0% overlap, except that I knew cell culture. That is it. That was the only overlap, and that was not enough. So for me, it was, I was spending hours and hours in the lab. Like I would spend 18, 19 hours in the lab, and I realized that it's not a healthy way of living, especially when you reach a stage of your life where you knew you started a company, you knew you got PI funding, you knew you got interviews from MIT, you knew you got faculty interviews, and then suddenly you are living a life that you do not deserve. Basically, that life you do not deserve to be. You know.
So the postdoc life basically demotivated you, and then you thought of
Yeah,
transition?
I would not generalize it. I also know there are postdocs who do it happily. It was not for me. I realized it was not
Mhm.
for me. And I did not want to still push it and do it for 3, 4 years. Then it's like you are feeding your ego. Because I knew that if I want to become a faculty, I have already done that. And
Mhm.
again, I early on during this call, I told you that flexibility of having that mindset and said this is the race to take a risk. Like even today, I feel if I want to join academia, I can start applying to faculty position and it will happen. So I can go back and forth. It's like just pursue your dream and do not start categorizing your career. Just do what you feel you are good for,
Mhm.
and you can be successful in multiple careers. So I joined, and I also had a knack for business because I had started my own company. I think I'm naturally wired uh, to network and communicate,
Mhm.
especially I would say from a professional front. I think I don't know how it happened. Where did I get it from? But that has been my strength.
Mhm.
And I knew that, I can leverage that in my professional career. And industry provides you a perfect ground for that because, so even though I am the global director of research and innovation at Caron, I have grown my business acumen. I have developed financial understanding of running a business. I established the distribution channel for Caron Products in India. So I now know about how to do business development overseas. Um, I have done overarching strategies for marketing for my company. So it's not just R&D that I'm doing here,
Mhm.
but I am doing so many other things that academia cannot provide you. It's just not possible in academia. And I think it was I do not even regret it a single day that I left academia to come to industry. It was a difficult decision, I would say, because once you marry to a dream, you do not want to give it up so easily. But again, I think like every other thing that happened in my life, it ultimately it's in your hand what you want to take from it, what you want to learn, and how you want to utilize that experience. It's been going very well,
Mhm.
and I know 5, 10 years from now, whenever I want to go back to academia, I can. I have no plans to do that, but I know I can if I want to.
Mhm.
That it will not be a difficult situation.
Amazing, amazing.
One career advice I would give everyone is we all have natural talent of one kind or the other. Make sure that the profession that you choose,
Mhm.
it allows you to leverage your natural talent.
Absolutely.
In my case, like public speaking, I like writing. I enjoy writing. I have been on stage throughout my life. I was a singer. Um, I have been on stage throughout my life. I think when you speak in conferences and when you do public speaking, TED talks, it allows you to express yourself. I believe I enjoy that, expressing myself on different platforms, and that is my natural talent, and I'm leveraging it to now to grow in my career.
Mhm. Mhm. And Jiten, can you tell us, like, how did you end up being, like, you applied for these jobs, or how did Caron happen in your life?
Yeah, so I was basically applying left
Mhm.
and right because I was in a very tight situation where I had less than 60 days left
For the visa.
on the visa. I was on H1B visa.
Mhm.
So I decided to leave my postdoc, and then COVID was happening. Companies were still not hiring with the same pace.
Mhm.
But I was fortunate. I would say I was at least giving 6 interviews every day. Every day. So in a week, I was giving anywhere between 35 to 40 interviews. So
Mhm.
getting a those interview was not a challenge, and I would also say that for some of the position I was even overqualified. Like they would ask me, why are you applying for this job? Why are you not applying to become a professor? Like people who had PhD in the interview panel, they'll say your profile is all set to be a professor. So it's like they were questioning, why am I doing this? Why am I making this kind of thing? So most of the time, those were the difficult questions that I have to answer. And then you do not want to say that I'm an immigrant, I don't have visa, like even though it is true,
But this
but
is
these
a very genuine problem. So most of the Indians, they can easily find job once they have the green card, but before the green card is the real struggle. And I've seen some of my seniors, facing the same challenges that you were mentioning.
yeah. So ultimately, what I did was I basically the first thing that I knew that I was getting enough interview. The first thing that I will ask during the interview or during the end of the interview, I would say, do you sponsor visa? Like if they email me, I'll say, do you sponsor visa? Because I was spending hours and hours talking and it was not leading to anything. And ultimately, few of them came up. Caron Products was one of them that immediately responded and said, for the eligible candidate, we were like, this position did not have visa, but we do not mind sponsoring a visa. And
That's
that,
amazing. Yeah. So,
and then same thing happened with my wife also. The position did not have O1A visa. So we both applied under O1A visa. O1A visa is the extraordinary
no, no,
ability
I
visa.
know Owen quite well. Like,
Okay,
my friend
nice.
went to Silicon Valley with the same visa. Yeah, that's like you have to make a profile which matches.
Yeah, it requires a lot from you.
Mhm.
But I was also applying for green card in the meantime. I did not tell you, like, yeah, I have applied for green card while all this postdoc stuff was happening. It got RFE, and then RFE's request for evidence, and it got rejection. So like in one case, like, so I have that tight window of less than 60 days. Green card got rejected, and then you have to make.
But it was all like an immigrant issue rather than, a merit issue, right?
Yeah. It was all immigrant related issues. Ultimately, it worked out. I joined Caron on O1A, and a few days later, I got my green card also approved. So it turned out, even if this visa would not have worked out, I could have still joined because my green card came through. Uh, but one thing has to happen before the other thing. Those were the sequence of events. I joined Caron as an application scientist, and today I serve as the global director of research and innovation. I love my employers. I am very grateful for the opportunities I have. I have very supporting mentors in the company, very good boss, who is my CEO, Jay Hexamer.
Mhm.
And the person who hired me, his name is Bob Daughter. Very supportive team, nothing to complain, and I'm enjoying every bit of it here.
Amazing, amazing. So, for the aspiring PM, say students, what are the key skill sets needed? So if one wants to be a global director of, say, research and innovation, what would be your advice in terms of
Yeah,
skill?
so when you become a global director of research and innovation, so the kind of thing that I work on is new product development, which is basically right from idea generation to the final production of the product. I head that entire strategy and execution. And then another thing is new product introduction, which is basically the market launch.
Mhm.
Third is mergers and acquisitions, which requires you to have understanding of finances. Like you need to have certain business acumen, and it is rare actually with PhDs that you would be involved in merger and acquisitions. I happen to be in the right place at the right time that I got involved in mergers and acquisitions also. And
Mhm.
then I'm also involved in heading the external testing of our equipments for validation by beta users.
Mhm.
And then we do internal testing. So I do all these kinds of work. And as I'm explaining these things, you would realize that it is not just research. You need to have financial acumen. You need to have sense of marketing. You need to
Mhm.
have sense of business development. All these things have to be in place. Again, I think because I'm naturally wired to do a lot of these things, it worked out for me, but it is not for everyone. I would say you see what is your natural talent
Mhm.
and then make a career choice. Like I also know people who would not enjoy the kind of job that I'm enjoying. They'll say I'm happy working as a lab scientist.
Mhm.
I want to be a bench scientist. I have met those people.
Depends on
Uh,
your acumen, of course, right?
yeah,
But coming to these skill sets, because you said gaining financial education, gaining some management skills and stuff like that. For me, my first job as a strategy consultant was the mini MBA. And I remember, I was sitting daily on Investopedia, learning all these financial jargons, reading so many annual reports from the company. So, did you do some like skill enhancement in terms of like course taking, or how did you coach yourself? Because I'm sure no matter how much, wide you are, some skills need to be taught.
absolutely. Yeah.
Your advice to, aspirants.
No, you said it very rightly. No matter how much wired you are, you still have that learning. You cannot compensate for that. There is a growth curve. For me, there was a growth curve. I used to get when I would hear words like EBITDA and then revenue,
Exactly.
uh, and these kind of terms, I was like, what is it? No, right? So I would always Google, and then I would ask questions. Like if I have finance related question, I'll go to the head of the finance. If I have business related question, I'll do the same thing. If I have sales related question, I'll ask the same person. But at the same time, I realized I started off as an application scientist, and then I got promoted as a global director of research and innovation. That was a huge jump. And then I have to also educate myself. And it comes with a lot of responsibility. If you are the one who is deciding the entire life cycle of a product, It's not just about great ideas. Those ideas have to make business sense also.
Absolutely.
And until I took up that role, I did not realize why X company does not have Y innovation, right? And once I took up that job, I realized like you need to know whether a product is uh, desirable by the consumer. Is it making sense in terms of its technical feasibility to the company? Is it a business viable case, meaning does it have a return on investment? So these three things I always keep in mind when I work on any product. But talking about educating myself, so I asked questions to the right people, watched a lot of videos, but I also took up a formal course with MIT Sloan. So I have executive education from MIT Sloan now. It was thanks to my employer. It was sponsored by Caron Products.
Mhm.
That course was really helpful, not just to be getting familiar with, these industrial jargons like NPV, net present value. Like we say list price in ordinary life, but NPV is what decides how do you decide the price of a product, right? So these things, it has a lot of background to it. So that course was very useful in helping me learn all those things. But another good thing that happened in that course is we had a team of 5 people who are also in leadership position in different companies. Now you also learn from them, and there is assignment and everything, but more than anything, you learn by interacting with people. So that interaction also helps. I'm still learning. I'm still not there, I would say, and the learning has no limit, and it's never done. It's never over.
Mhm.
I'm still learning, but I believe because I thought I'm naturally wired through that. I enjoyed learning. Sometimes it can feel like a burden also.
Mhm. No, but that is so good because I can totally relate to this because if you have the hunger of learning, I think you can always learn anything, you know. And many of the things I think you learned on the job, and I also learned on the job, right? So
Yes, yes. And I
yes.
would also say that maybe that hunger of learning is not about learning everything. I would say maybe if I have to learn ABC, I'm not as motivated as learning about X, Y, Z. So it depends on what you're learning about. Something naturally aligns with your natural talents, and I
And
would
your
say
natural
make investment
interests.
in those things. Yeah. Otherwise, it's a struggle. You know, learning
If you
honestly.
don't like something, it is a struggle. So I totally understand. Yeah.
So, Sundar Pichai once, maybe it is not his quote, but in one of his interviews, he mentioned, uh, love what you do and do what you love is what is the advice for all the youngsters. Do not just do something because someone else is doing it.
Mhm.
Do what you love. And once you are in it, start, uh, you know, uh, find reasons and give yourself daily dose of motivation to keep forging forward.
Amazing, amazing. So, what are some of the most exciting developments in your field right now? Any?
So,
Mhm.
yeah, the field in general, I would say if you look at the biopharmaceutical industry right now, one of the upcoming field is cell and gene therapy.
Mhm.
The rate of approval have really gone up because of, I think COVID has taught us this is a blessing in disguise that drug development can happen at a much faster pace. I remember when I was learning about drug development back in 2006, 2007, the journey of a drug development was about 25 years or 20 plus years. It has been cut down to 3, 4, 5 years now. And this is one of the benefit or the blessing in disguise of COVID that we now know that if we want and if the government supports, you can actually do drug development faster. So cell and gene therapy, it is moving with a very high pace. The fortunate part is that it has allowed you to treat some of the diseases that were considered untreatable, so that they are treatable now. But the downside is it's coming at a very high cost, like millions of dollars per treatment, which is not for everyone. But I believe that if we have enough approvals
Mhm.
that are continuously coming, the cost will ultimately come down. Now, as someone who is working at Caron as the global director of research and innovation, uh, we develop tools, we develop equipments, and I believe you know, we are also one of the force that can bring the R&D cost down, because when you make efficient uh, equipment that can drive results, equipment that can cut down on time, cut down on efforts, you ultimately save time and money down the line, and that results in lower cost or affordable medicines that ultimately benefits the patient. So everybody has to play their part in the chain. We were talking about scientist and doctor. And this is what I feel now as, I have gone even a level, that I'm doing the background work for scientists now. I was a scientist.
You are enabling science basically, right?
I'm enabling science now, and which I love because I, again, I accidentally came to a company like Caron Products. I never planned that I would be working for a company that makes lab equipment, but it was happening. Like when I was giving interviews, similar companies were coming, like Appendolph was another company. They also make lab equipment, Sartorius. I was giving interviews in these kind of companies. So I think it was the fate that brought me here. For me, the value proposition was I have never done this before, so I want to try this. I have jumped field from biotech to cancer biology to bioprocessing to biomedical to trying cell and gene therapy, that postdoc phase, and now bioinstrument. So I wanted to try something new.
But that also enables you to have, diversified skill sets, which is, I think, really
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah.
It gives you a lot of perspective because you are not thinking like everyone else. You have so much different angles through which you can see a situation, and that works in my advantage here at Caron. I think that perspective I have experienced, like people say cell culture, I have worked on adherent, suspension, 3D, microfluidic based encapsulation, you name it, and I have done it. Spheroids, organoids, I have worked on all kind of things you can imagine, and that is not a usual thing. Even within life science, you work within your own narrow research base, but I feel grateful that I have a very diversified research portfolio, which is paying off now.
Amazing. So, you are a man of multi-talent. Tell us more about your hobbies.
Multi-talent. So I think
Yeah.
um, I have written a novel, not yet published it, but I have written a novel. I'll publish it. I'm waiting on certain things, but I'll publish it soon.
And was it,
Uh,
it's like a sci-fi novel or what?
it's a
Give us a,
Let me put it this way. It's a fiction novel that is based on a true story. So I've taken inspiration from different people I have met in my life.
Mhm.
But the
It's a
story is
true story, right? Like you should sell it like that.
no, I would
It's
say
not a true story, right?
the characters are true, but the story is fictional.
Okay.
So the inspiration is taken from certain people I have met in my life, but the story is still fictional. The ground is fictional.
Mhm.
But their behavior is like coming from real people. Now, this is how I see it. Um, so I like public speaking, I like singing, I like writing, but I think it ultimately comes down from one fact that I think maybe I have an urge of expression.
Mhm.
Singing is a form of expression, human expression. Writing is a form of human expression, and then
Public speaking.
public speaking. So I thought about it, like why am I jumping between too many different things? And
No,
I
I
like,
think it's just one thing, which is, and you have a YouTube channel as well. Perhaps you can just tell our audience about the channel. What do you do?
yeah. So that channel basically it provides you stuff for higher education and also visa related challenges that you may face specifically in United States.
Mhm.
So whatever challenges I have faced in my life, I try to turn them into videos and then put it.
No, but that's so important because I think, a lot of people will get, because they're more or less in your similar shoes, right? So
Yeah.
you can,
And yeah, some of those videos have done very well. I think so. I do not post regularly, but one video has crossed 70,000 views. Another one has
you
crossed.
can just send me the link. Perhaps I can, paste that on our podcast so that, they can also, our audience can also visit your channel.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also has advices for people who are aspiring to do PhD and postdoc. So I believe it will benefit everyone. So now, yeah, we were talking about now multi-talent. So I would say expression, and I see science the same way. When you want to become a scientist, you have some ideas in your mind. You want to express those ideas and give them a physical form. So ultimately, I think that is the root cause of why I'm doing different kinds of things. But ultimately, it's one thing I'm doing, which is expressing myself in different uh, ways.
Amazing. Amazing. So with this, I think, it's time to wrap up. Thank you so much, Jiten, for sharing your insight with us today. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Absolutely, Manish, and thank you so much for inviting me. It was the feeling is mutual. I enjoyed talking. I think after a very long time, I have spoken so much. We have been talking for 2 hours now.
Yes. Hopefully, I can edit it in a time frame that is,
Yeah, yeah.
to the listeners. But yeah, it has been a big pleasure for me. Learning a lot from your journey, and it was quite an inspiring journey.
Thank you,
And
thank you. I feel the same.
yeah, and to the audience, thank you for tuning to Biology Career Insight. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to get the latest episodes delivered straight to your device. See you next time. Bye. Bye, Jiten.
Bye.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Take care. Bye.